Turns out I was wearing the same jacket in the picture. I have other jackets, just to be clear, as an Italian. So thanks for being here. I'm Gabriel Columbro, Executive Director of FINOS. The most attentive might remember me from previous appearances under the Symphony Software Foundation logo, but we have just rebranded and relaunched our foundation about 2 weeks ago. We had a big event at the NASDAQ market site. We're now FINOS, the FinTech Open Source Foundation. Now, what does that mean? And again, why should you care? Well, first of all, we were very much focused just on the Symphony platform, which many of you probably are familiar with. But we realized that there was a much broader opportunity, as we've heard from some of the banks and some of the vendors here. There clearly is a massive interest to embrace open source. And honestly, this is not something that certainly I've helped pushing forward, and I think this is a massive potential opportunity for anyone in this room. But the idea obviously has been supported by a lot of key players in the industry, and so really we realized after 2 years of building a trustworthy community, more than 60 projects out there, our friends at OpenFin and many other vendors, on top of some of the most influential banks in the industry, they realized that there was, again, no reason why we shouldn't apply the trust, the governance, the massive support that we were getting from the different constituents to more platforms and more use cases than just Symphony. Therefore, that is why we are now FINOS, the FinTech Open Source Foundation, very much open to any open standards and open source initiative in financial services. This is what we really see as sort of our core mission. Now, why did all those players there, we heard a few reasons, but fundamentally there are, in my mind, 2 reasons why people are engaging with open source and why they're looking at FINOS to help them in this journey, which, as we know, is more complicated probably in financial services than in other regulated industries than in sort of industries that have embraced this in the past. There are 2 reasons in my mind. One is value, and the second one is innovation. Now, I understand they're both a little bit vague, so let me go and drill down a little bit into the detail. I believe, and we believe, that building on open source, whether you are a vendor or you are a bank, and as we know, pretty much we're all technology companies right now, we believe that building on open source delivers additional value. And I think that comes through a few reasons. The most compelling for me is that we are changing drastically the way that we build software and how software delivers, again, value to these ultimately end users. So if you think about how software used to deliver, or generally how any supply chain will deliver value to their end users, well, it's pretty straightforward. You got production, you got distribution, you got marketing, and then you got your consumers getting value. It's one way, it's linear. In other words, you can call this a solution play. If you're building a solution, well, that's pretty much what you do. You build something that delivers some value to one specific customer. But as we probably, I assume you guys would agree with me, but as we heard, and we're sort of overwhelmed by platforms right and left. And this is no different in financial services. And so based on the idea that we are delivering value in a much different way, based on putting together components and putting together platforms that ultimately deliver value, it's, to me and to us as a community, it came clear that value is not delivered anymore in a sort of one way. If you think about sort of the most common platform that we can think about out there, Facebook, Airbnb, the value is not the code. The value is not the technology. The value is actually delivered by connecting players and creating channels that would not exist before. So if you think about it, the The value of Facebook is content. It's not the underlying code that they have. The value of Airbnb is, houses. It's not, again, the underlying code that they have out there. And Facebook does not own any content. Airbnb doesn't own any houses. So if you, again, stop thinking for a second, if you are building a platform and you are trying to create value and deliver value out of this platform, well then, your value is not the code. Your value is whatever you build above what we call the value line. That's what your secret sauce is. And so the more you create an open ecosystem, the more you create an ecosystem where any player can participate without sort of having bilateral agreements, without having to be locked in on one specific standard or one specific piece of code, well, that's when actually a platform will deliver the most value. And so that's why, for us, not only building on open standards or open APIs, which I think everyone is familiar here with, and it's been hundreds of years that open standards have delivered sort of better integration between sort of in the whole supply chain. We think that open source delivers even more, whether you are a vendor or you are an end user or any type of participant in the software supply chain, an integrator or a partner, you build plugins. I'm not going to go through every single detail, but we've been sort of talking a lot about why open source can deliver advantages like vendor lock-in prevention, the idea of getting contributions from the community, albeit in this industry a bit more complicated than others, but there's clearly a major advantage whether you are an end user or a vendor to build on top of open source and open standards. That's what we think will create an open ecosystem that ultimately will create compounded value. How about innovation? Well, I'm not going to spend too much time on this because I think the facts sort of speak for themselves. In my mind, all the major innovations over the last 15 years have been delivered through open source. Again, you can look at the simple timeline here, but there will be no cloud without open source. There will be no SQL technologies without open source. There will be no blockchain without open source. There will be no, or we're seeing a major acceleration in machine learning without open source. So again, just to make it, innovation is a bit of an abstract concept, but I think, again, if you look at the last 20 years, all the major pieces of innovation have been delivered through open source, and from many different players, whether you are a SaaS vendor and you want to leverage open source to de-risk your sort of core components, whether that's Cassandra, Apache, Hadoop. There's many reasons why, whether you are, again, either a firm that wants to mutualize and reduce cost, or a vendor, and so you want to de-risk some of the investments on your code, well, then you want to look at open source to improve sort of your the speed and the velocity that you deliver innovation with. And so it's all good, it's all fine, you just put everything open source and we're, and that's all. No, actually, doing open source is not easy. We do believe that, especially in a regulated industry, it's not easy, but again, any type of enterprise or individual embracing open source, try to contribute back and engage sort of in that two-way dynamo of value and innovation, needs to work accordingly, according to certain principles. Whether it's the trust that you need to build as a community towards people that are actually contributing your IP, and that's where we think we had a major opportunity after 2 years working in this industry and having some of the major players. Well, we felt we have gained the trust of both vendors and banks. We have more than 10 banks contributing to our foundation. By the way, we are a non-profit 501c6 foundation. It's not, you're asking people to contribute their time and their code, so we want to make sure that this is an efficient experience. You can obviously put the code out there in GitHub, but we want to make sure that if you're putting time in working with us, we will provide you, not only help in sort of managing the project lifecycle, but also a best-of-breed developer experience that actually can work for many of the firms. We heard from our JP Morgan folks how difficult it is to sort of directly contribute to open source. Well, that's one of the areas where our foundation, we feel that is going to provide sort of really that sort of safe space for this industry to collaborate and contribute. And finally, growth. I've seen plenty of projects out there that are sort of dumped and run. We believe as foundation that our objective and our main missions is to help your projects thrive. And so, again, it's not easy to build community. We can advise and we can help. And obviously, this is one of the main reasons why people decide to put their projects in the foundation versus out there in the wild, if you want. And so, just to be specific, how do we do that? What has changed and how can you get engaged? Because if there's one thing that I'd like you to take away today is, how can you get engaged? Why it makes sense for you? We have moved from one program, there was the sort of Symphony program, the founding program, if you want, to a multi-program foundation. Our board manages, actually steers and approves all the different programs that then are largely independent. And so, as you can see, we have, actually I'm not showing all the programs out there. We actually have 8 already approved in just 3 months of operations. But I'm gonna focus on a couple of them today. FDC3 and specifically the Open Source Readiness Program. But the idea is that programs are, just so that you guys get familiar with it, are actually consolidated areas of sort of initiatives to solve a specific business problem, whether that is through projects, so open source collaboration, whether that's through working groups that might build a policy, might build an open standards. The idea is that we will have collaborators and contributors work under sort of the same umbrella and governance by contribution. So the more you put sweat equity, the more you have influence in that program to solve common problems in this industry. There's been a lot of talk around interoperability, and so I'm pretty excited to announce, we actually ran a release today, that the FTC3 initiative that was started by OpenFin late last year and has gained so much support is now a program under the FINOS Foundation. I am pretty excited. Again, probably not the best person to talk specifically about the details of what the different working groups are. I think you guys are way more expert than me on that. But obviously the idea is that we're trying to define standards for desktop interoperability and have, I think that's where the differentiator comes, also reference implementations that anyone can use and make it a no-brainer for anyone here to adopt and bring into their platforms. Obviously, we need contribution. We all are successful or we all sing together. And so a couple of ways that you can help there, it's not just about code. There's, wiki content, there's, helping us with meeting minutes. There's a lot of ways that you can get involved. And if you go to our GitHub page or to the wiki page, we actually have a PMC and our program management committee that can really guide you into how you can be helpful and support this program. Just one note here, I think it's really important that initiatives like that are run into a independent, sort of collectively owned foundation, because that really gives the trust to any of the players that, again, should anything happen, the code or the standard that is built is always going to be there, and we actually have a governance to sort of, mediate some of those conflicts that obviously there are, because everyone is here for its own sake, ultimately. I'm concluding here. Not going to spend a lot on this slide, but as we said, this industry is sort of at different degrees of maturity as far as open source goes. Whether you're a vendor or a bank, there's clearly a lot to do to, again, be successful at delivering value, but also gaining value out of open source. And so in not only consuming, but also contributing. Again, not spending a lot of time on this, but we see that as our key mission for this year. This is just the beginning. Having launched this foundation puts us in the position of really helping the industry to embrace open source, but we will need, again, everyone's contribution. And so that's why we're running, a collaborative program that anyone can participate to, as well as obviously we work with our members to really make sure that, ideally by the end of this year, they all should be able to actually directly contribute to open source, because obviously that's what's going to create the community that I think everyone in this room wants. This is how you get engaged. Obviously, come and talk at my booth later on if you're interested. But just know that, first of all, the community is open to everyone. Our members obviously support us economically, but and help us to run, and pay the salary at the end of the month. I guess more than once a year. But it's not just about code. First of all, consuming, it's fine. You should come, consume, and as our JP Morgan friend said, it's going to come natural that at a certain point you want to contribute back rather than maintaining your own fork that is going to be behind, especially if there is a community that is, actively and lively pushing that product forward. You can host an event with us. We'll sponsor it. We'll help you out sort of creating enablement. Obviously, there's contribution and there's leadership and maintenance of some of the projects, like our OpenFin friends are doing for FDC3. So again, come and talk to us. I think this is a massive opportunity for everyone. This is not limited to our members, so there's no price tag attached to any of these engagements that you see here. So thank you so much for your time, and I hope to see you in my booth.